any of the guys that have just logged on to join us for this Comic Relief event, thank you. It should be an exciting and informative 40 minutes. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Charlene White, and this is called Actions Beyond the Hashtags. This is the first of a series of online events hosted by Comic Relief to explore topical and important conversations. So over the next 40 minutes, I'll be talking to both Sir Lenny Henry and June Sarpong, who I hope you'll be able to see just now. And then after us, there'll be a preview of some incredible African-led award-winning films. And there'll also be a panel with those filmmakers as Comic Relief profile their partnership with East African film company, DocuBox. So what is Actions Beyond the Hashtags, I hear you ask? Well, luckily I can answer that question for you. That global Black Lives Matter movement that was just incredible earlier on this year. It was worldwide. There were people taking to the streets here in South Africa, in Australia, in America, of course, just all over. And because it caused so many of us to have very open, very frank, sometimes very difficult conversations about racism and about inequality. And Comic Relief as a charity is no different in terms of that. As we know, the charity has raised millions each year for various causes and social causes, but they also recognise the importance of using their platform to spark conversations and to inform audiences and to reflect on how their funding and fundraising can better represent and reflect Black communities. So Comic Relief is listening and it's learning and it's trying to make positive change. And this series is one of several actions beyond the hashtag that they are taking. So I'm just delighted to be able to have this conversation with Comic Relief Honorary Life President Lenny Henry and BBC Creative Director of Diversity, June Sarpong. How are you guys?
Hello. Hey, Charlene, how are you?
I'm good. This is going to be quite fun, I think, Lenny. And Lenny, I am loving the hair at the moment.
Thank you very much. It's locked down here, but I think I'm going to keep it.
Keep it. It makes you look 10 years younger.
Oh, thank you so much, June. You look about the same, by the way.
Thank you.
I didn't want to say anything. You always, ever since I've met you, you just always look ring like that. So congratulations. I don't know how you're doing it. I'm sure there's a mirror in your bedroom somewhere with a very old lady there. Why aren't you a doctor yet? But, you look fantastic. Everybody looks fantastic on this. Zoom. This is the best looking Zoom I've ever seen.
Oh, definitely. Got to agree with you there, Lenny. Definitely the best looking Zoom ever.
It looks like a very positively cast version of the Brady Bunch. All the millennials going, what's that? What's he talking about?
What's that? Google it. Right, guys. I mean, we could just like chat as though we're sat at dinner all for the next hour, but we can't do that. So you've got to concentrate on the things that we need to discuss here. And there is quite a bit to get through. And I know that lots of the guys that are watching, you have posted some questions when you registered for both June and Lenny, and I will get to them towards the end of the session. Don't you worry about that. Now, guys, it's been a weird year, hasn't it? 2020, when you team together the impact of COVID and also those Black Lives Matter protests. I know we throw around this word quite a lot in news, but it really has been unprecedented. And as we head towards the end of the year, I just want to ask both of you what your thoughts are, your reflections on 2020. June, I'll start with you.
Yeah, of course, Charlene. Well, I think what 2020 has shown us is that we cannot control anything, can we? I mean, all of us, in terms of whatever New Year's resolutions we made, we definitely had no idea the kind of year we were going to have. And I think that as difficult as this year has been, and don't forget, it's probably going to get worse once we really feel the fallout of the levels of unemployment that's likely to be in our society. The work that you guys do becomes even more important in terms of Comic Relief. I think that also once we see perhaps the impact on people's mental health from the change in how our lives are now being lived, and the fact that we are all disconnected from our loved ones, and a lot of people are feeling isolated. Once we feel all of that, I think things perhaps will be even heavier than they are. However, that said, I do believe that this is an opportunity to create something new. We've never had a time I can think of anyway, where the whole world is in reset mode, where you have something that impacts everybody, albeit differently, but we're still all impacted. The fact that we are doing this event virtually, when normally we would have been together, is an example of that. I think that we are all asking ourselves much more profound questions in terms of who we are as individuals and the kind of impact we want to have on our world. And that, of course, we've seen heightened with everything that's happened with Black Lives Matter. So I think it's an important time in history, and we have to make sure we make the right decisions so that we can create a new way.
I could see you nodding away there, Lenny. In terms of your reflections on 2020, what would you say?
Some really good thoughts there from June. I think it's important to reflect also upon the death of George Floyd. This was a huge trigger for people around the world. And what made me incredibly optimistic about the future, I know June's on a kind of slightly pessimistic tip, and I think that's
I'm optimistic.
No, but I think you're right. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But what made me have heart was the fact that George Floyd's death was an extraordinary trigger for people around the world, whoever they were, black, white, Chinese, were across the world. You saw this vast amount of people protesting for justice. And I think that this idea of social justice being fought for by a majority of people, by everybody getting on the same page and saying this needs to change, that's been the big change I've seen. I've never seen so many people united about this singular and incredibly important cause. And it's about time. I think a lot of people are saying it's about time you saw what was going on, and it's about time you reacted in a positive way like this. I think that we have to be careful with these things, because often when the effects of an emergency wear off, people tend to take their foot off the pedal. And I think we should always remember this moment. 2020 has been a pretty horrible year, but we should always remember the moments we were triggered and try and hold that in our heart to give us the impetus to move forward, to continue change. Because clearly with the people that make the decisions about these things, only if they have that feeling in their heart do they keep the foot on the pedal. Sometimes the gatekeepers tend to take their foot off the pedal if they feel nobody's watching. Yeah. So we need to say we're still watching. And what's great is millennials, the young people, are saying we are absolutely watching. There's a new set of ethics, a new set of morals, a new set of direction coming up from young people. They want our gatekeepers to be accountable. They want to feel like they're being heard, and they want to know that something is being done. And I think that if we can keep that pressure on our gatekeepers, our leaders, then eventually they're going to be shamed into doing things, which is perhaps not the ideal way of having to do something, but at least it's a start.
Well, in that vein, and in talking about change and things developing and the gatekeepers making decisions about things, which in a lot of circumstances, both on screen, off screen, in charities, in broadcast media, in print media, all over, it feels as though lots of people are having conversations and trying to change the status quo. I mean, Lenny, you hit our screens first back in 1975 and June 1996, I believe, with MTV. And fast forward to 2020, if we're talking about changes on screen, because that's where we'll start with this, what kind of improvement do you think there's been so far this year, if any, really? Lenny, start with you.
It's not just been this year. I remember in the 90s, I made a film called True Identity in 1990. And what was interesting was all the big studios in America wanted their own Spike Lee. So Spike Lee had blown up, and then suddenly the Hudlin brothers and, Dead Presidents, there were all these new directors coming up. And then Spike clearly was the keeper, and then everybody else fell away. And some people got to kind of get their claws in and stay, but the ones that needed the support fell away to the wayside. And what it seems to me is that here we are in 2020, and there are a few more people. With the advent of streaming, we see people like Lena Waithe and Shonda Rhimes and people like that. But it feels to me that unless the gatekeepers change, you're not going to get this sustained progress. The minute the gatekeepers change, what tends to happen is people go, oh, we're not doing that anymore. I've got a new plan. The new broom sweeps clean, and we're not doing that black thing anymore. We're doing this other thing. And what I think is that if we work and if we campaign in terms of who is making those decisions about what gets made and why, then you'll see sustained progress. It'll keep going. And it's why I've been campaigning over the years, and June too, for systemic change, for law changes. I've been campaigning particularly for diversity tax breaks and ring-fenced money, because only when these things happen will you see a proper change, I think. And June getting this extraordinary position at the BBC is, I think, a very, very big step. So I think that when we move on from this, we hold these things in our heart and we try and go, okay, let's try and sustain change rather than let it fall away.
June, how about you?
Yeah, well, I think the thing I want to do first, Charlene, is to thank Lenny, for one, being a pioneer in terms of as a talent and as a creative, and two, for his advocacy work and the fact that he has continued to challenge gatekeepers. And I think part of the reason I have the job that I have is because of the work that he's been doing and has been doing over the years, challenging the people at the highest levels of our industry to be more inclusive. And I think that it's fair to say that I do think that there is a shift happening, and it's because of a number of things. Obviously, what happened with George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter movement has accelerated the pace of change, and you yourself as a talent is feeling that. If you look at what you all did last week with Loose Women, the all Black panel, I was on Loose Women, and I can assure you when I was on Loose Women, there's no way that would have happened. So the fact that this has changed in a space of even 3 years is remarkable. And I think that what's happening now is, for the first time, commissioners across the board, all of the broadcasters who themselves have been the gatekeepers, who in the past were quite exclusive in terms of who they gave opportunities to, even they are beginning to realize that perhaps maybe they didn't do this one right. And maybe here is the time to be able to redeem themselves and change things. And so I know I'm in rooms with commissioners who I know probably turned me down because they didn't think mainstream audiences perhaps would connect to me. And the wonderful
fools.
Whatever.
The mere fact that you can even say those words as someone who I was appointment to view when you were in T4. I absolutely adored watching you in T4. So for even those words to come out of your mouth just seems ludicrous to me.
Well, no, but let me finish. What I'm saying is, the wonderful thing about it now is, I don't do as much presenting anymore, and I'm quite happy to hand it over to the next generation. But the wonderful thing about it is now I'm now in rooms with all of the commissioners, and I see the opportunities they are giving the next generation. Same commissioners who thought one way before, thinking very differently now. And so I really believe that there is a lot of change happening. And I think if we look back 5 years from now, our industry is going to be completely different. And I'm excited by that.
The reality, though, Lenny, although, as June says, some of these commissioners are realizing that perhaps they didn't make the right decisions many years ago, but not everybody is ready for this pace of change. For a lot of viewers, not for a lot, but there are a section of viewers who feel as though the change is happening far too quickly. But there were pockets of people sort of go, that this is not what I want to see on my screen. It's all too much. They're shoving this down my throat now.
I really think that's it's the viewer's prerogative to not watch if they don't want to watch. But change is going to happen whether you want it to happen or not. These things are going to happen. I noticed that there was a massive response to the Argos ad with the two mixed race families, and last year with the Asian father drumming and the little mixed race girl drumming. My favorite advert, of course, that started a lot of this was the Maltesers advert with the two black girls chatting and being really funny. And how incredible that something like that, as innocuous as a Maltesers advert, would cause so many people to go, well, that's not right. Black people don't eat Maltesers. But I used to say this for years of where are the people of color in the commercials? I eat cornflakes. I eat cheese and ham sandwiches. I go to the pub. I have insurance. Where am I? And it was a matter of the people in the positions of power making a decision about how to make that program, that advert, and make the decision about who should be in that advert for what they thought was a predominant audience. And actually that has changed. And I know change is glacial, and when you're in the middle of it, it feels really, really slow. But believe me, as June says, we're in the middle of a huge catalytic change. Things are happening very, very fast. And what I want to say to everybody out there is, you got to catch up. You got to catch up, because the young people that are coming up want to see their values reflected in the people that employ them, that lead them, and they're going to push if we don't push too. We all need to be pushing together.
I like the fact that you brought up advertising, actually, Lenny. And I know advertising isn't something that the BBC do, June, but I would like to know your thoughts on this. Historically, I feel as though perhaps when it came to using Black people in advertising, it was for like the cool stuff. So, you know, trainers, for example, you know, sportswear was a big thing that they would use Black people in adverts for. Do you feel as though, understanding what Lenny said, that actually we buy things, regular things and other things like everybody else, that people are starting to understand that?
Well, I think the only way to do that authentically is to make sure that your teams are diverse, so that that's not alien to the people that are making the decisions, so that they actually have an understanding of it. And therefore, if there are any blind spots in a meeting or in a team around decision making, there's somebody there that can highlight it, or a few people there, ideally, that can highlight it. In terms of, I'd like to pick up on what you said about your last question, when you talked about audiences being resistant. I do think that there's also a need to understand that and have compassion for that. And I believe that there's a way to be able to do both, and to be able to create content that challenges your audience, brings them perhaps in contact with an issue that they may not have considered. If you live in a very homogenous community, you're not faced with many of these things on a daily basis. There's a way to do it that feeds into the sort of human connection. And again, this is why it's so important to have diverse teams in terms of who makes the programming, because often what happens is, because of some of the guilt associated with this stuff, sometimes you can go overboard. But actually, if you have somebody who is of color themselves and understands Britain and understands the makeup of our whole audience, they can help you create the content in a way that works for everybody. And that's why it's so important to have diverse teams.
Yeah. Which brings us nicely on to talking about Offscreen, actually, because one of the things that I guess Comic Relief has come under fire for is the way in which those charity films are made, and the viewpoint from which those stories are told. And that, you know, a phrase which has been used time and time again regarding that is looking at it in a white savior sort of way. And I know that there was a big announcement today, Lenny, wasn't there?
Yeah, what's been brilliant is over the last few years, there's been an evolutionary process going on in terms of what Comic Relief wants to put out there and how Comic Relief wants to be perceived in the future. And I think that we began in terms of an emergency. There was a famine. We responded to that. And I think that in terms of having Indigenous people make decisions about how they are portrayed to the rest of the world, I've always thought that it was interesting when I went to film in places in Africa like Kenya or Uganda or Burkina Faso or wherever, that I would usually be the only Black person in the team, that everybody else would be white, and everybody was groovy. No bad people in this, everybody was groovy. And the kids would go, hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? To all the white guys. And then when they got to me, they'd ignore me, and then they'd move on to the next person. Hello, how are you? And over the years, what was very funny was in places like Kibera, the kids were so used to white film crews around that they would go, do not set up over there, set up over here. You'll get a flare in the lens if you shoot from there. And get my sister in the shot. She is very attractive. Where is my per diem? I need to eat. You know, kids are so used to white film crews now that so what I kept saying, and what various members of the team started to come round to, was an idea of why aren't there Indigenous filmmakers making these appeal films? Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we working together to make films? And the most important thing is, why aren't we giving local people agency? the
An
opportunity
opportunity as well.
and a platform to say, here is my representation of my community. This is our story. Let me tell you the story. Because it'd be very different from having somebody else, even me, coming in and going, here's this thing, look at this, please give us money. Imagine an indigenous local filmmaker saying, I want to tell you about this particular project. And it would have just as much agency and power and resonance as if somebody from here had made it. Because let's not forget, there are huge optical things that happen when you watch a lot of these, not just comic relief, but when you watch a lot, some of them are worse. A lot of these Africa appeal films, some of them are incredibly, this child will die, this child is starving. And we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of that, going back to when I was a little kid, and there were images of starving children from Biafra, and we had to send in things to Blue Peter. Right up to present day, they're still using these images. And as we've said about the triggering nature of Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd, images matter. Images transcend and go all over the world. The world is smaller. Everybody in the third world is watching things on their phone, and they can see how they're being represented. So we need to be a part of the team that says, you tell your story. And I think that's what's going to happen. And with this filmmakers initiative, which is called the SEMA Story Project, we've got a group of young African filmmakers from all over Africa grouped together, and we're funding them to make films about their communities and about their projects. And you're going to see a couple of examples of them later on. It's a huge, huge move, and huge props to Comic Relief for leading the way on this, because I do think it's about time. It's fantastic. And this is not to say that the films that have been made in the past weren't extraordinary and didn't have a huge effect, but it's the time to do this now. It absolutely is. It's the time for young Black and brown filmmakers to own, claim, take charge of this and go, I want to tell you my story. I want to give you my version of this. And I can't wait for the reaction of the kids when they see the film crew setting up. It's going to be great.
It's an exciting thought.
It's huge.
And does it, I mean, it obviously really did kick off last year in terms of having celebrities go over and tell these stories. And I remember reading the articles about it. Was there a point at which you sort of thought, Lenny, actually, do you know what? We just should have been doing this all the time. It seems obvious now. It seems obvious that we should be having local talent do this.
It takes a while to learn something, doesn't it? You're in learned behavior for quite a long time. And then there's a transition point when you go, oh, actually, there are other ways to elicit sympathy. There are other ways to elicit someone going, actually, I'm going to help with this. There are other ways. And maybe we've been pushing on the same button for too long. Yeah. It's been a while since David Bowie held up that picture at Live Aid. Over 30 years. It's time to think of another way of telling those stories now and eliciting a mutual love and respect and care, but actually working with Indigenous filmmakers that can tell stories with dignity and integrity and lived experience. Once you have people telling stories from their own experience, that will change. And there are so many award-winning filmmakers coming out of the third world. Why aren't we, and we are, working with them to tell this new generation of stories? That's what's happening next. I'm proud to be involved with it, and it's going to be dope.
And presumably, June, that this is something that you're very much in support of.
Oh, of course. I think it's brilliant that this is happening. And actually, I have to say, obviously Comic Relief received a lot of criticism from various groups and parties. And it's wonderful to see that they have sort of heeded some of those messages, but also found a creative way of solving this issue. And the thing we also mustn't forget is the good that Comic Relief has done. Because at the end of the day, back to what Lenny was saying, that sometimes if you've been incredible, the goal was always to be able to raise funds to challenge and tackle poverty, some of the harshest poverty we have in the world. And those films, and I'm not in any way justifying them, but they were very powerful and very successful at doing that. So sometimes when you're successful at something, it can be difficult to then change. And I
Yeah.
think it's wonderful to see that they have made the change and that actually they are giving opportunity to these wonderful young filmmakers on the continent. And who knows what kind of talent will be developed and found as a result of this. We may have the next Richard Curtis coming from Africa. I look forward to it. So I think it's going to be an exciting thing. So bring it on.
I mean, as you say, it's a great way of finding new talent on the continent. And in terms of Black creatives behind the camera here, you know, what's the best way to bring them in to also give a slightly different perspective on a particular subject, on a particular film, on a particular series, for instance, June?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't speak for Comic Relief. Obviously, what they do is for them. But in terms of the BBC, what we're doing is we now have our code of practice that comes into effect from April next year, which means that 20% of all talent behind the camera for all new commissions have to be from diverse communities. And we're focused on 3 core areas in terms of underrepresented groups, which is BAME, disability, and social economic diversity. And so there's a real push for talent behind the camera. And really the importance is about who gets to tell the stories, who's being given the opportunity to make the stories. The other thing as well, success for us will not just be giving BAME or disabled creatives a fabulous opportunity with a super indie. Yes, that's great, but actually what's much more an example of success for us is when we're able to develop a new pipeline of diverse owned indies that are making for us.
Of which you have a production company, that's right, Lenny, isn't it?
I do. I've got a production company.
Lenny makes for us all the time anyway. In fact, you just made a fabulous show. The classical music one was wonderful.
That was incredible. I have to say, Lenny, that was amazing.
When you've got your own production companies, you can see what's happening and what you can do to change people's perception of how things get made. So, you know, Black Classical had a mostly diverse crew, and it was about a diverse and inclusive subject. And it's to do with interest. You know, the idea of giving people their own agency is an incredibly valid thing to do. But in terms of tone and attitude and who is telling the story and lived experience, all of these things come to the party. All of these things show up from day one. And there's a leveling off of balance as you're making something. Whereas if you're just working in an echo chamber, you'll get the same reply every single time, which is why June's right. You know, the more we can make the teams diverse, the more balanced you'll get, the more balanced ideas and tone and attitude you'll get in the output.
I think the argument that's sometimes heard in telly, and I'm not sure how it works in the charity sector, but is often that there aren't enough qualified people, minorities, to be able to take on things like executive producer roles or directing roles, for instance. Sometimes people go, but there isn't enough people. There aren't enough experienced people to take on those roles. These things take time.
Tell Steve McQueen that. Tell Amara Santi that.
It's rubbish.
The pipeline is there. I think the pipeline has always been there, but people are a bit lazy and they don't look. You know, of course there's talent there.
And look, and also I think in the past they've known where the talent is, they just haven't given them the opportunities. So the talent have gone elsewhere. They've gone to other industries or they've gone to America. Yeah. So no, the talent is there, and now it's our job to bring the talent back and ensure that the talent gets the opportunities they deserve.
And stop talking about risk. People keep saying, "Oh, it's a risk," you know.
Not a risk.
You know, everybody makes their first thing, and then they make their second thing, and then third thing. But what happens often with Black talent or minority talent is they make the first thing and then they go, oh, well, you messed that up. You're not going to do that again. We need to have the opportunity to not make such a good film. And then the next film we make is pretty good. And then the third film we make is brilliant. Yeah. Only, you know, Samuel Beckett said, ever failed, fail again, fail better. Unless you get the opportunity to fail in a public space, you're never going to get any better. So the pipeline is there. Please explore it. There are many, many talented people out there who probably won't fail first time, but they need to be given the opportunity to show you what they can do. Otherwise, you're never going to see that.
It's interesting because I was watching Mo the Comedian's documentary talking about black comedians, which was on Channel 4 last week. And he was speaking to Curtis Walker, a comedian, which I grew up on, and I just found, I know, just hilarious. And Curtis made a really good point where he would say, you know, he'd be touring with other comedians across the year, and a comedian that was really struggling at the start of the year, a white comedian really struggling at the start of the year, by the end of the year could be on £1 million contracts. Yet you've got a whole group of black comedians who were doing exactly the same work, putting in, probably working twice as hard and doing twice as many shows, and not get that level of contract. And usually one person is allowed in. So it's almost like having a token minority comedian or a token minority entertainer, for example. Do you think we'll reach a point in entertainment, Lenny, where it won't just be just that one person that's allowed through the door to show how amazing they are, that everyone gets a fair crack at the whip?
Well, unfortunate turn of phrase there. But I think things are changing slowly. There are more comedians of colour proliferating on television at the moment. But as I say, it's slow. But, you know, there's Mo, there's Judy Love. There are a few more Famalam, Enterprise. There are some very good and funny and talented people out there. And they are being picked up. They are getting an opportunity. But as I keep saying, what's happening with viewers is, I talked to a guy a couple of years ago who just said, oh, I just watched Fresh Prince repeats on Trouble or on whatever, because I don't see me enough when I watch television. That is changing. They got to stop cramming it all into Black History Month, because I'm black all year round. But I think they need to. I think once they start thinking in terms of spreading it around, then you'll see gradual change. I already see it actually. You know, you see Shappi Khorsandi on Live at the Apollo, or Jeannie Asheray now, but there have been some misses in the last few years.
Yeah.
There have been some series ended too soon. 3 Non-Blondes, Miss Jocelyn. Jeannie Asheray never got her shot. Felix Dexter died and never got his shot in this country at his own series. So we need to stop that happening. And really, when we see a talent that deserves to be there on BBC One or BBC Two or whatever, we need to go, boom, it's you, and elevate them to that place where they can own their thing, have their platform, and do their thing, and have it be appreciated by a broader audience. And I think that I was very blessed. Len, you is a blessed child. You is blessed. That's my mom. I was blessed and very lucky, and I worked very, very hard, and I made lots of mistakes in the public sphere. But after I'm gone, what's great is I do see the new seeds of encouragement and the new seeds of new talent coming up. And I think that's good.
June, do you think there's a chance that if change doesn't happen, then terrestrial channels really will be left behind? In a sphere where you've got, you know, where we are, you know, I'm on a terrestrial channel, I'm on ITV, and we are battling against, as PSBs, we are battling against those big digital platforms that are really raising up and are really shaking things up. Obviously, their models are different from ours, but is there a chance that we could really be left behind with this?
Oh, of course. And I think the wonderful thing, though, is the sort of commissioners and creatives understand that. You know, Charlotte Moore's brilliant on this and really makes sure that she sends that message to her creative teams about why this matters. And for me, having somebody like her to work alongside, who really is committed to this agenda, just makes my life that much easier. And also now we have the mandate as well. I mean, Tony was brilliant, but we also have the mandate from Tim, where it's now going to be linked to KPIs. So in terms of commissioners, it's not just about future-proofing the BBC, which of course is absolutely crucial, but their own performance will be judged on this metric too. And so I'm really excited. I think you're going to see a lot of change over the next few years. I think we're going to see some great talent coming through. Lenny was talking about comedic talent that's coming through. I know for us, Shane, who's our head of comedy, is really developing Sophie Duker. And I think Sophie's going to be doing some fantastic stuff for us in the future. There's a generation of young comics that I'm really excited to see. And I think that the opportunities that have been available for their white counterparts, even the comedy agents themselves are realizing that the way you craft the career of diverse talent perhaps is slightly different in the way that you have to find new ways of making sure that majority group audiences come to see them. So I think that there's an understanding there that was never there before, sadly, for the days of Curtis and so on, that there is now. So I think we're going to see some big stars coming.
And I think this idea of facilitating local filmmakers in the Africa continent is brilliant, because it gives this idea of agency and a platform to people who just haven't had that. And in terms of in Britain, there are things that we work throughout, like the mental health issue and the elderly and young people, where I think those people could make films too. I think it's important to encourage people who've lived that experience of disability, of oppression, of poverty, to make films and tell their own stories. And maybe this is something that can be replicated here too.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
I mean, the way I always kind of look at these things, and I'm having discussions with people, is I sort of, if you're making a film about feminism or periods, for example, would you want a man to tell that story, or would you want that lived experience of a woman telling that story, for instance? And I think sometimes when you use the male-female comparison, I sometimes feel as though people can be a little bit more comfortable and get it more than when you're talking about race. And actually, I'm going to try and throw in some of these questions, because you've got quite a few coming in. And actually, we have someone here that says, as a white person, I was brought up to look for what we have in common and to understand that skin colour was irrelevant. It's now often said and written that it's important to see colour actively. The theory of this is understandable, but in practice it feels strange to want to emphasise difference. It almost puts a barrier up that feels as if it shouldn't be there. Do you have any reflections on this?
Yes. Well, I think the problem with that, and I totally understand where it comes from. It comes from a very earnest place. But it's often because we see white as the default for normal, and anything that isn't white as abnormal. So basically the idea being, if I'm saying I don't see color, it means in my head I'm seeing you as white. That's kind of what that means. And I think that actually what we need to become much more comfortable with is that, yes, there is difference, but there's beauty in difference. And of course, the majority of stuff, because we are humans, is the same. You know, we all have the same wants and needs, et cetera, but we have a system that means that not everybody gets to experience those needs. And so actually, if we are mindful of that, we can meet each other as people, but not pretend and make one group have to fit into another in order to be accepted. So what I would say to that gentleman is, there's nothing wrong with seeing color. When you see me, of course, you're going to see I'm a Black woman. The point is, you shouldn't only judge me on that, but you should also understand that that is an asset that brings something else to this interaction that we are about to have. And so what I would say to him is, get comfortable with difference. There's nothing wrong with it. And yes, of course, we have a lot in common too.
Lenny?
What she said. See me, of course, experience me in all my complexity and weirdness. I'm a human being. I deserve to be seen. I want to be seen.
I want to be seen. Yeah. I like it.
I like it. Don't worry about it. Don't be embarrassed about it. I'm back all year round. Try the veal.
We've got a question here about the charity sector. I'll throw this one to you, Lenny. What do you think is the main thing the charity sector in the UK is getting wrong when it comes to supporting the Black community in Britain?
Well, as Comic Relief has just announced funding about £6 million worth of Black-led organisations, there's this sense of that's come about because of listening. I think the idea of communication and sitting and listening and really seeing what the problems are in a community and dealing with people on the ground who know what those problems are, rather than making an assumption about what that community needs and then being slightly tone deaf about it. That's probably the way forward with those things. You know, you don't get anything by just saying, we'll do this now. You've got to invite the people who are in that problem to the table and say, what can we do to help? And then have a conversation about it and make some choices with those people. It's the time to stop making decisions on behalf of people. People have a voice. They're allowed to give voice to that, and they should be allowed to be an agent in terms of what happens and how to facilitate change.
Of course, of course. And in terms of change, I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of it exploded across the world because of social media and because of that hashtag BLM that was shared so widely online on social media. And June, do you think that what impact do you think social media has had in the past few years in terms of driving and accelerating change?
Oh, a huge impact, because I suppose before, all of these emotions were out there, but in order for them to get the attention they deserved, you had to go through the gatekeepers, didn't you? It was whether or not press would cover it. What social media does is it allows you to see what people are thinking and feeling straight away. Obviously, there are a lot of negatives around social media, but I do think where this issue is concerned, no question, it has accelerated the pace of change. And also, that's what allows the movements to spread globally as well. Something can go viral in a matter of seconds, which is what we saw with that tragic, senseless killing. And so for young people, this is their outlet. This is how they express themselves. This is how they connect and communicate with each other. So without question, it's played a huge role.
And there's a question here, which would naturally be my next question to that. And I'll do that in response to that. And I'll put it to you, Lenny. How do we keep the momentum going over the next few months and next few years? So, as you say, it's not just something that's within Black History Month or just happening this year. How do we keep the momentum going with this?
Well, in terms of consuming, we need to support our artists. We need to support the people that are out there doing stuff. But we also, in terms of gatekeepers, as I keep saying, keep the pressure on in terms of changing the face of every room we walk into, so that we feel represented when we walk into the room. I spent over 35 years going into rooms at the BBC and ITV and never seeing a face that looked like mine, ever. It's only recently, and I'm talking about an eye blink, in the last 10 years, blink, it started to change slowly. And that's good, but it needs to speed up. And the way to keep the pressure on with that is to keep asking questions, keep pointing out when there's been a diversity fail and say, this needs to change and really not well done enough. And I know that people don't like this idea of holding people's feet up to the fire. And it's not, in the end, I'm not sure how useful that is anyway. But in terms of changing the face of that room, not necessarily in the boardroom, because boardrooms aren't really the ones that make the decisions. It's the executives that make the decisions. Let's make the makeup of that decision-making process more inclusive, and I think you'll see change. And we have to keep the pressure on. We have to do that. In terms of, if you look at the way people reacted to what happened a few months ago, it's a human right to be represented by people who look like you, to feel represented when you watch yourself in the media, when you read about yourself in the media. It's a human right to be represented with dignity and integrity and respect. And if we want that, then we have to fight for it.
And can I add to just quickly, I completely agree with everything Lenny just said there. The only thing I would add to that is also, do give us credit when we do get things right, because often we're constantly being told when things are wrong, which is right, and we accept that. But I do think that when we do make decisions that are moving things in the right direction, it's also nice to get a bit of credit for that too. And not just particularly for me, but I think for broadcasters in general, because that is also what motivates them to do more. I know for ITV, the credit that they're getting for what they did with Loose Women, we're going to see that replicated on many other shows as a result of that. So I do think it's important to call out the wrongdoing, no question. Don't let anybody off the hook, but also do the same when something is done right.
And as long as everyone remembers that Loose Women did it first.
Well, I don't know if you did. I think there are many examples, but we're not going to go there right now.
Well, guys, that has gone very, very swiftly. Did you want to say one final thought, Lenny?
I think I was going to say that evolution happens in a line, And also, I think it can go backwards and it can go forward. And I think comic relief was always evolving.
Yeah.
Everybody involved with comic relief has been extraordinarily hardworking and put in so much effort. You know, I remember being in a room with Richard writing letters to all of these people to say, please be involved with comic relief. And the feeling was that, you know, we are in the midst of reacting to this extraordinarily tragic occurrence. And what those things might still happen, and the response is still there when it's needed. But now there's a more positive and inclusive thing that we need to be doing, and we all recognize that, and we are acting to effect change. So congratulations to everybody for being on board with that and wanting it to happen. And I salute everybody involved, and I salute everybody who got involved with us back in the day and going forward who's going to keep being involved with us, because none of these things happen alone. Otherwise it'd be me in my pants on the high street with, you know, a sign saying please help. I think that it's great that people are on board and want to continue helping, but what's also brilliant is that there are different things being put in train that will mean that people will be able to own these issues and have a part in the problem solving, and that's all we want to do going forward.
Absolutely. And maybe one day we will see you in your pants on the high street, Lenny. I don't think anyone would see a problem with that.
Could I say one?
I'm going to try it this afternoon.
Very quickly, June, go on.
Just to say what an amazing job you've done with this, and just what an amazing broadcaster you are, and how lucky ITV are to have you. And we will be watching ITV. She's not getting the promotion she deserves. Some of us might be on the call. Just letting you know, hashtag.
If anyone from ITV is watching, there are no plans for me to jump ship. It's okay. Please don't panic. Well, guys, this has been brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and for everyone that's watching wherever you are, give them a virtual round of applause. It's honestly been brilliant. Thank you, Lenny, for explaining and talking us through the way that the Comic Relief is really committed to overcoming racial inequalities and telling stories in a slightly different way. And make sure that anyone watching do go to the Comic Relief website where you can get more information about that. Thank you all for joining us virtually, for taking part in this. This has been amazing. Oh, and I've just been given the actual web address. Let me click down. It's comicrelief.com/tackling racial inequality. So make sure that you do take a look at that, and do not forget that this is only one part of a webinar this morning. Part 2 starts in just 5 minutes time, well, 10 minutes time at 11 a.m. So go grab yourself a cuppa and maybe a couple of biscuits or something, and then click over to join the panel discussion with award-winning African filmmakers and get a first look at the SEMA Story Initiative films. You will not want to miss out on any of that. So this is your 10-minute warning. Go put the kettle on, go for a week break, do grab some bickies and watch the next panel. And for June and Lenny, thank you so much for joining us.
Charlene. Thank you. Bye.